Here we go now. Come on. Come on. Alrighty, testing. Hi guys. Gosh, you can't see me very well there, can you? Let's come over here a little bit and see if that gets any better. Goodness me. Yeah, very dull this evening. Let's no. Okay. Alright, how's that? A little better? It's so dark. Did not realise it was this dark. I'm very sorry. Alright, hello small people. How you going? Alright, welcome to the live stream. Oh, and you know, I can hear him shouting from the back. You've forgotten me. And I've forgotten the other star of the show. My co-host, Blind Bedlington. Oh dear, you'll just have to give me a moment and I'll just go and get him. Excuse me. Better. Ooh, hooray, I found him. And look who else I found as well. I found Takashi as well. So say hi, Takashi. Say hi, Bedlington. Hi. That's Takashi saying hi. Alright. Okay, yep. Here you go. Cruise around over there while we do our stories. No. Takashi's not very good at sitting still. Rats are quite active. They like to cruise around and sniff everything. Okay, so how has your weekend been? Mine's been quite quiet. Perhaps yours has been too. Have you been doing some cool stuff in lockdown? Have you been doing some colouring in? Have you been playing some games? Have you heard of a game called Totem Tennis? It's a pretty fun game where you have a pole stuck. You can probably guess a little bit what kind of game it is. But you have a pole stuck in the ground and the pole has like a spiral on it. And at the top of the pole is a piece of string, a long piece of string. And on the end of the string is a tennis ball. And you kind of throw the tennis ball, and because it's on the piece of string on the pole, it only goes round and round, and one person stands on one side of the pole and another person stands on the other side, and you both have a racket. And basically you play tennis, but instead of having a net and you put the net over and over, and the ball, you can miss it and it can go everywhere and you have to spend all that time running around after it, the ball always stays on the pole, and you just bang it back and forth, round and round. You can play all sorts of games, like whoever gets it to the top of the spiral wins, or whoever gets it to the bottom of the spiral wins, whoever gets the most hits in like a minute or 3 minutes wins, or all sorts. You can make up your own rules. It's really fun. And yes, so it's been really a cool thing to have in lockdown. And the funny thing is I actually forgot that I had it for a while because I had put it away from the last one. And I just saw the poll and everything today and went, oh my gosh, that's right, we've got totem tennis. And do you want to know the other really cool thing about it? You can play it if you're just by yourself. And it's just as much fun. Well, it's not quite just as much fun because I guess having extra people is fun as well. But it is just pretty much just as fun to play on your own. And also you can have one racket in each hand and you can practice playing both-handed and get heaps better than everybody else. So, and then the other thing I did today too was it was a really beautiful sunny day. So I went, and for my exercise, I went down to the skate park and I had a nice little roll down at the skate park. And I was at the skate park by myself. There wasn't anybody else there, but there were some other people, some families out there, some mums and dads with their kids and some mums and dads with their dogs. And everyone was getting their exercise outside and enjoying the sun. And it was really, really nice. It was a really beautiful day. So I didn't spend very long down there. So probably just about 40 minutes or so, just tucking up and down. Because I'm a bit out of practice with my skateboarding. I've had a bit of a long break, unfortunately. But drought is over. So do you like skateboarding or roller skating or roller blading, or do you ride a bike? Or what else other fun things are there to roll? Oh yes, scooters. Scooters, like, as soon as you get good at a scooter, you should move up to something like a bit more challenging than a scooter. But scooters are okay to start on. And if you're having fun, cool. What else is there to ride? Maybe you're a really lucky person and you have a horse and you get to ride your horse or your pony like other people get to ride their bikes. That'll be fun, wouldn't it? All right. So, do you remember what our story's called and what it's about? It's called The Call of the Wild. And remember, it's about a dog. A dog who started off his life very privileged and very lucky and very well loved and well fed. But unfortunately, he's been stolen. And he's been taken away way, way, way up to the icy northern parts of wild northern Canada to be a sled dog. And he's had to learn a whole new way of life. And we are up to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called The Dominant Primordial Beast. And remember this is just a story, okay? So there are some sad parts and, there might be some parts that make you feel a bit unhappy or a bit unfortunate. But remember, it's just a story. It's fiction. That means it's just made up and never really happened. And the fact that you're feeling something is a really good thing because it just means you're a normal person with feelings. And that's the beautiful thing about stories, is it can help us to feel things, but we're nice and safe when we feel them because we know that it's just a story and we can let the feeling come, express it when it happens, and then just let it go and keep moving along with the rest of the story. Okay? So let's get ourselves nice and comfortable wherever we're sitting. If we're sitting in bed or if we're snuggled up on the couch, have you got your favourite teddy or toy or your favourite person with you maybe? That would be pretty good too, to be snuggling down with your favourite person. And let's get started on chapter 3, The Dominant Primordial Beast. And remember, we talked about what primordial meant a couple of chapters ago. Primordial, it means like very, very old, like before prehistoric. The dominant primordial beast was strong in buck, means like the original. And under the fierce conditions of trail life, it grew and grew. Yet it was a secret growth. His newborn cunning gave him poise and control. He was too busy adjusting himself to the new life to feel at ease, and not only did he not pick fights, but he avoided them whenever possible. A certain deliberateness characterized his attitude. He was not prone to rashness and precipitate action, and in the bitter hatred between him and Spitz, he betrayed no impatience, shunned all offensive acts. On the other hand, possibly because he divined in Buck a dangerous rival, Spitz never lost an opportunity of showing his teeth. He even went out of his way to bully Buck, striving constantly to start the fight which could end only in the death of one or the other. Early in the trip, this might have taken place had it not been for an unwanted accident. At the end of this day they made a bleak and miserable camp on the shores of Lake de Barge. Driving snow, a wind that cut like white-hot knife, and darkness had forced them to grope for a camping place. They could hardly have fared worse. At their backs rose a perpendicular wall of rock, and Perrault and Francois were compelled to make their fire and spread their sleeping robes on the ice of the lake itself. The tent they had discarded at Daia in order to travel light. A few sticks of driftwood furnished them with a fire that thawed down through the ice and left them to eat supper in the dark. Close in under the sheltering rock, Buck made his nest. So snug and warm was it that he was loath to leave it when Francois distributed the fish which he had first thawed over the fire. But when Buck had finished his ration and returned, he found his nest occupied. Someone was in his bed. A warning snarl told him that the trespasser was Spitz. Until now, Buck had avoided trouble with his enemy, but this was too much. The beast in him roared. He sprang upon Spitz with a fury that surprised them both, and Spitz particularly, for his whole experience with Buck had gone to teach him that his rival was an unusually timid dog who managed to hold his own only because of his great weight and size. Francois was surprised too when they had shot out in a tangle from the disrupted nest, and he divined the cause of the trouble. "Ah!" he cried to Buck. "Give to him, by God! Give it to him, the dirty thief!" Spitz was equally willing. He was crying with sheer rage and eagerness as he circled back and forth for a chance to spring in. Buck was no less eager and no less cautious as he likewise circled back and forth for the advantage. But it was then that the unexpected happened. The thing which projected their struggle for supremacy far into the future, past many a weary mile of trail and toil. That means it got put off to a later date. An oath from Perrault, the resounding impact of a club upon a bony frame, and a shrill yelp of pain heralded the breaking forth of pandemonium. The camp was suddenly discovered to be alive with skulking furry forms. Starving huskies, 4 or 5 score of them, who had scented the camp from some Indian village. They'd crept in while Buck and Spitz were fighting, and when the 2 men sprang among them with stout clubs, they showed their teeth and fought back. They were crazed by the smell of the food. Perrault found one with his head buried in the grub box. His club landed heavily on the gaunt ribs, and the grub box was capsized on the ground. On the instant, a score of the famished brutes were scrambling for the bread and the bacon. The clubs fell upon them unheeded. They yelped and howled under the rain of blows, but they struggled none the less madly until the last crumb had been devoured. In the meantime, the astonished team dogs had burst out of their nests, only to be set upon by the fierce invaders. Never had Buck seen such dogs. It seemed as though their bones would burst through their skins. They were mere skeletons, draped loosely in draggled hides with blazing eyes and slavered fangs. But the hunger madness made them terrifying, irresistible. There was no opposing them. The team dogs were swept back against the cliff at the first onset. Buck was beset by 3 huskies, and in a trice his head and shoulders were ripped and slashed. Oh, the din was frightful. Billy was crying, as usual, Dave and Sol Lex dripping blood from a score of wounds. They were fighting bravely side by side. Joe was snapping like a demon. Once his teeth closed in on the foreleg of a husky, and he crunched down through the bone. Pike, the malingerer, leapt upon the crippled animal, breaking its neck with a quick dash of teeth and a jerk. Buck got a frothing adversary by the throat and was sprayed with blood when his teeth sank through the jugular. The warm taste of it in his mouth goaded him to greater fierceness. He flung himself upon another, and at the same time felt teeth sink into his own throat. It was Spitz, treacherously attacking from the side. Ooh, dirty Spitz. Perrault and Francois, having cleaned out their part of the camp, hurried to save their sled dogs. The wild wave of famished beasts rolled back before them, and Buck shook himself free, but it was only for a moment. The 2 men were compelled to run back and save the grub, upon which the huskies returned to attack the team. Billy, terrified into bravery, sprang through the savage circle and fled away over the ice. Pike and Dub followed on his heels with the rest of the team behind. As Buck drew himself together to spring after them, out of the tail of his eye he saw Spitz rush upon him with the evident intention of overthrowing him. Once off his feet and under that mass of huskies, there would be no hope for him. But he braced himself to the shock of Spitz's charge, and then he joined the flight out on the lake. Later, the 9 team dogs gathered together and sought shelter in the forest. Though unpursued, they were in a sorry plight. There was not one who was not wounded in 4 or 5 places or more, while some were wounded grievously. Dub was badly injured in a hind leg. Dolly, the last husky added to the team at Daya, had a badly torn throat. Joe had lost an eye, while Billy, the good-natured, with an ear chewed and rent to ribbons, cried and whimpered throughout the night. At daybreak, they limped warily back to camp, to find the marauders gone and the 2 men in bad tempers. Fully half their grub supply was gone. The huskies had chewed through the sled lashings and the canvas coverings. In fact, nothing, no matter how remotely edible, had escaped them. They'd eaten a pair of Perrault's moose-hide moccasins, chunks out of the leather traces, and even 2 feet of lash rope from the end of Francois's whip. He broke from a mournful contemplation of it to look over his wounded dogs. "Ah, me friends," he said softly, "maybe it make you mad dog, those many bites. Maybe all mad dog. Sacre dame. What you think, eh, Perrault?" The courier shook his head dubiously. With 400 miles of trail still between him and Dawson, he could ill afford to have madness break out among his dogs. 2 hours of cursing and exertion got the harness into shape, and the wound-stiffened team was underway, struggling painfully over the hardest part of the trail they had yet encountered, and for that matter, the hardest between them and Dawson. The 30-mile river was wide open. Its wild water defied the frost, and it was in the eddies only and in the quiet places that the ice held at all. 6 days of exhausting toil were required to cover those 30 terrible miles. And terrible they were, for every foot of them was accomplished at the risk of life to dog and man. A dozen times Perrault, nosing the way, broke through the ice bridges, being saved by the long pole he carried, which he so held that it fell each time across the hole made by his body. But a cold snap was on, the thermometer registering 50 below zero, and each time he broke through, he was compelled for very life to build a fire and dry his garments. Oh yes, otherwise he would die of hypothermia. Nothing daunted him. It was because nothing daunted him that he'd been chosen as government courier. He took all manner of risks, resolutely thrusting his little weazened face into the frost and struggling on from dim dawn to dark. He skirted the frowning shores on rim ice that bent and crackled underfoot, and upon which they dared not halt. Once the sled broke through, and Dave and Buck and they were half frozen and all but drowned by the time they were dragged out. The usual fire was necessary to save them. They were coated solidly with ice, and the two men kept them on the run around the fire, sweating and thawing so close that they were singed by the flames. Another time, Spitz went through, dragging the whole team after him up to Buck, who strained backwards with all his strength, his forepaws on the slippery edge and the ice quivering and snapping all around. But behind him, was Dave, likewise straining backward. And behind the sled was Francois, pulling till his tendons cracked. Again the rim ice broke away before and behind, and there was no escape except up the cliff. Perrault scaled it by a miracle, while Francois prayed for just that miracle, and with every thong and sled lashing and the last bit of harness rove into a long rope, the dogs were hoisted, one by one, to the cliff crest. Francois came up last, after the sled and load. Then came the search for a place to descend, which descent was ultimately made by the aid of the rope, and that night found them back on the river with a quarter of the mile to the day's credit. Only a quarter of a mile. By the time they made the Hootalinqua and Good Ice, Buck was played out. The rest of the dogs were in like condition, but Perrault, to make up lost time, pushed them late and early. The first day they covered 35 miles to the Big Salmon. The next day 35 more to the Little Salmon. The third day 40 miles, which brought them well up toward the Five Fingers. Buck's feet were not so compact and hard as the feet of the Huskies. His had softened during the many generations since the day his last wild ancestor was tamed by a cave-dweller or riverman. All day long he limped in agony, and camp once made, he lay down like a dead dog. Hungry as he was, he would not move to receive his ration of fish, which Francois had to bring to him. Also, the dog driver rubbed Buck's feet for half an hour each night after supper, and sacrificed the tops of his own moccasins to make 4 moccasins for Buck. This was a great relief, and Buck caused even the weazened face of Perrault to twist itself into a grin one morning when Francois forgot the moccasins and Buck lay on his back, his 4 feet waving appealingly in the air, and he refused to budge without them. Can you imagine it? Can you picture that? Big Buck, big sled dog, laying on his back, waving his little feet. Oh, where's my moccasins, please, boss? Later, his feet did grow hard to the trail, and the worn-out footgear was eventually thrown away. At the Pelly one morning, as they were harnessing up, Dolly, who'd never been conspicuous for anything, went suddenly mad. She announced her condition by a long, heartbreaking wolf howl that sent every dog bristling with fear, and then she sprang straight for Buck. He'd never seen a dog go mad, nor did he have any reason to fear madness. Yet he knew that here was horror, and he fled away from it in panic. Straight away he raced with Dolly panting and frothing, one leap behind. Nor could she gain on him, so great was his terror, but nor could he leave her, so great was her madness. He plunged through the wooden breast of the island, flew down to the lower end, crossed a back channel filled with rough ice to another island, gained a third island, curved back to the main river, and in desperation started to cross it. And all the time, although he did not look, he could hear her snarling, just one leap behind. Francois called to him a quarter of a mile away, and he doubled back, still only one leap ahead, gasping painfully in air, and putting all his faith in that Francois would save him. The dog driver held the axe poised in his hand, and as Buck shot past him, the axe crashed down upon Mad Dolly's head. We're very lucky in Australia. We don't have that disease here. It's called rabies. And it will make that, it's a very horrible, horrible sickness that animals get, and it makes them go mad and attack everything. And there's no cure for it. Buck staggered over against the sled, exhausted, sobbing for breath, helpless. And this was Spitz's opportunity. He sprang upon Buck, and twice his teeth sank into his unresisting foe and ripped and tore the flesh to the bone. And then Francois's lash descended, and Buck had the satisfaction of watching Spitz receive the worst whipping as yet administered to any on the team. "One devil, dat Spitz," remarked Perrault. "Some day him kill dat Buck." "Dat Buck two devils," was France's rejoinder. "All the time I watch dat Buck, I know for sure. Listen, some fine day him get mad, and then him chew dat Spitz all up and speed him out on the snow. Sure, I know." From then on, well, it was war between them. Spitz, as lead dog and acknowledged master of the team, he felt his supremacy threatened by this strange Southland dog. And strange Buck was to him, for of the many Southland dogs he had known, not one had shown up worthily in camp and on the trail. They were all too soft, dying under the toil, the frost, and the starvation. Buck was the exception. He alone endured and prospered, matching the husky in strength, savagery, and cunning. Then he was a masterful dog, and what had made him dangerous was the fact that the club of the man in the red sweater had knocked all blind pluck and rashness out of his desire for mastery. He was preeminently cunning, and he could bide his time with a patience that was nothing less than primitive. It was inevitable that the clash for leadership should come. Buck wanted it. He wanted it because it was his nature, because he'd been gripped tight by that nameless, incomprehensible pride of the trail and trace, that pride which holds dogs in the toil to the last gasp, which lures them to die joyfully in the harness and breaks their hearts if they're cut out of the harness. This was the pride of Dave as wheel dog, of Sol Lex as he pulled with all his strength, the pride that laid hold of them at the break of camp, transforming them from sour and sullen brutes into straining, eager, ambitious creatures, the pride that spurred them on all day and dropped them at pitch of camp at night, letting them fall into the gloomy unrest and uncontent. This was the pride that bore up Spitz and made him thrash the sled dogs who blundered and shirked in the traces or hid away at harness time in the morning. Likewise, it was this pride that made him fear Buck as a possible lead dog. And this was Buck's pride too. He openly threatened the other's leadership. He came between him and the shirks he should have punished, and he did it deliberately. One night there was a heavy snowfall, and in the morning Pike, the malingerer, did not appear. He was securely hidden in his nest under a foot of snow. Francois called him and sought him in vain. Spitz was wild with wrath. He raged through the camp, smelling and digging in every likely place, snarling so frightfully that Pike heard and shivered in his hiding place. But when he was at last unearthed, and Spitz flew at him to punish him, Buck flew, with equal rage, in between. So unexpected was it, and so shrewdly managed, that Spitz was hurled backwards and off his feet. Pike, who'd been trembling abjectly, took heart at this open mutiny, and sprang upon his overthrown leader. Buck, to whom fair play was a forgotten code, likewise sprang at Spitz. But Francois, chuckling at the incident while unswerving in the administration of justice, brought his lash down upon Buck with all his might. Well, this failed to drive Buck from his prostrate rival, and the butt of the whip was brought into play. Half stunned by the blow, Buck was knocked backwards, and the lash laid upon him again and again, while Spitz soundly punished the many times offending Pike. In the days that followed, as Dawson grew closer and closer, Buck still continued to interfere between Spitz and the culprits, but he did it craftily, when Francois was not around. With the covert mutiny of Buck, a general insubordination sprang up and increased. Dave and Sol Lex were unaffected, but the rest of the team went from bad to worse. Things no longer went right. There was continual bickering and jangling. Trouble was always afoot, and at the bottom of it was Buck. He kept Francois busy, for the dog driver was in constant apprehension of the life and death struggle between the two, which he knew must take place sooner or later. And on more than one night the sounds of quarrelling and strife among the other dogs turned him out of his sleeping robe, fearful that Buck and Spitz were at it. But the opportunity did not present itself, and they pulled into Dawson one dreary afternoon with the great fight still to come. Here were many men and countless dogs, and Buck found them all at work. It seemed the ordained order of things that dogs should work. All day they swung up and down the main street in long teams, and in the night their jingling bells still went by. They hauled cabin logs and firewood, freighted up to the mines, and did all manner of work that horses did in the Santa Clara Valley. Here and there Buck met Southland dogs, but in the main they were the wild wolf husky breed. Every night, regularly at 9, at 12, at 3, they lifted a nocturnal song, a weird and eerie chant, in which it was Buck's delight to join. Oh, oh. Have you heard dogs howl? It's a pretty cool sound, isn't it? You know, like some dogs, they howl when they hear the harmonica playing. Alright, small people, we're going to leave it there. So we will pick it up tomorrow night. So with the team just pulling into Dawson, their destination, and with the dominant fight for dominance between Buck and the current leader, Spitz, yet to happen. Who do you think is going to win? Do you think Spitz is going to win? Do you think Buck will triumph? Or do you think one of the men will jump in and interfere and hold it off again? What do you reckon? It's very sad about Molly and the dog that went mad. But, remember it's just a story, okay? So it's the feeling. If you feel sad, that's totally cool. You can feel totally safe to feel sad or sorry or upset or anything like that. And and know that it's not real, but you can still feel it if you like. Okay, because that's the power of what stories do to us. Okay, so should we have our little couple of breaths and let the day go away from us and invite the warm and comfortable and peaceful and restful sleep with beautiful dreams? You ready to do that with me? You ready, Birdlington? Alright, so you know the drill. We're going to take a big breath, as big as we can. And as we take a big breath, we're going to pull our shoulders up as far as we can. And then we're going to gather in all our day into our breath. And then we're going to breathe it all the way out. And we're going to let our shoulders drop down. And we're going to let our body get heavy and push out all the breath in our lungs. Okay, we'll just do that a couple of times. And that'll make us feel nice and relaxed and ready to go to bed and fall asleep nice and easily. Okay, you ready? Let's do it. You ready, Bedlington? Yep, Bedlington's ready. Okay, let's go. So you can have your eyes open or you can have your eyes closed. It doesn't matter. Okay, so let's have a little wriggle first. Oh, a bit floppy. Make sure you're all ready. Okay. Okay, breathing in all the way and shoulders up. Pulling your shoulders up. Okay, I reckon you can get some more air in. Little sip more. Can you sip some more in? Okay, ready to let it all go. Gather up the day. Breathe it all out. Blow. Okay, out it goes. Floppy. Oh, heavy. Big breath in. That's it. Couple more sips. Can you sip some more day in? Gather up the rest of your day. Oh, here's a bit more over here. Oh, okay, ready? Breathe it all out. Relax the shoulders. Floppy. Go all heavy and floppy. Alright, should we do one more? Pull those shoulders up. Pull. That's it. Can you get any more day in? Bit more. And let it all out. You're all heavy and floppy and heavy and just let your head hang. Couple of nice normal breaths. Gently bring your head up. That's good. Then give yourself a nice big hug. And as you're giving yourself a hug, you can imagine all the people in your life that you love so dearly. And you can imagine giving them a big hug too. Hug them as tight as you can. And in your head you can tell them how much you love them. I love you this much as I can squeeze you. There you go. And as much as you are able to squeeze and send that much love, that's how much you are also loved. Okay? Alright guys, so remember, just before you fall asleep, remind yourself that you're going to sleep really soundly. You're going to have really nice dreams if you'd like to have dreams. And tell yourself you're going to wake up all bright and chirpy tomorrow, jump out of bed all happy and ready to face the day. Okay? And you can fall asleep tonight knowing that you're really awesome just the way you are, and that you are well loved by lots and lots of people. Alright? So you have a safe and wonderful night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night at about 7:30. Alright? I love you guys heaps. Alright, ready to go? Alright. What was that, Bedlington? One sec. Okay, just like that? Okay. Bedlington asked me to tell you that he loves you very too, and he wants to give you a big hug and a big kiss goodnight. Okay, so cool guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Woo, bye bye.